Similar to the string class, there's a lot of methods here. And at any time, you might find many of these different methods very useful. But like the string class, we don't actually need to know all of these methods. So which ones do we need to know? Okay, well, let's consult the exam appendix quick reference. Again, this contains the subset of methods that we're required to know. And here's our math class. And here are 5 methods that you are required to know for your AP test. Now, all of those other math methods could obviously come in useful at different times, but for the purpose of this class, for the purpose of the AP test, you only need to know these 5. Okay, we just talked about the square root method. There's also a power method. This is your exponent method. There's 2 different absolute value methods. So like we saw with the string class substring, this is an overloaded method. It can be called 2 different ways. It's actually real easy. Basically, the idea here is with the absolute value, if you provide an int value, you'll get back an int value. And if you provide the absolute value method with a double, you're guaranteed to get back a double. Okay? And then there's also this one here called the random method. Now notice that the random method is actually parameterless. So you don't provide any additional information when calling the random method. Now let's try a few of these out in BlueJ. Okay, so first of all, let's look at that absolute value method. It's actually real easy to use. The basic gist of the absolute value method is if I put in an integer, like -17, I will get back an integer. However, if I put in a double, such as, and again, with a double, I could actually provide an integer in place of a double. But let's say I give this thing a double, like -18.9, okay, then I should get back a double. All right, so real basic. And if I put these inside of print statements, the first one would print 17. The second one would print 18.9. Just like in your math classes, the negative is going to be removed. Okay, we also saw the power method. Now, the power method, POW, okay, requires 2 parameters to be used. First, it requires a base, and second, it requires an exponent. So, if you wanted 5 to the 3rd power, 5 would be your base, 3 would be your exponent. You can use integers here because doubles can accept integers. You can also use doubles. So you could find out what pi to the 2.3 power is, for example. And like we saw earlier with the square root function, you're guaranteed to get back a double even if it's not required. And this is a static method. So let's try this out. Let's see a couple of those things I was talking about. So if I go straight to a print statement here, and I ask the compiler to print, and I'm going to use Math.pow, and I'm going to give this a base of 2 and an exponent of 5. Now those are both integers. Okay, that's okay. You can provide an int anytime a double is required, right? Just can't do that in reverse. Can't give a double to an int variable. But here this should be fine. 2 to the 5th is 32. Okay, the one catch is, since this method has a return type of double, I think we're going to see 32.0 printed when we execute. So let's check that out. Okay, sure enough, I got 32.0. So 0.0 wasn't really required, but that method was written to return a double type value, and that's what it did. And that's what it's going to do every single time. Okay, now like I said, if you wanted to, you could put something in here like a little bit different. So maybe you've heard of like the famous problem e to the pi I. Let's try that out. Now, it might not work perfectly in Java, but if I want to use the number pi, okay, the way I call that is I reference the variable from the class that it's in. Okay, so if we went back to that source code that I was looking at earlier, maybe you noticed right up here there was a final double called pi and a final double called e. These are both static values, so that means I can call them by referencing the class that they're in, and then I don't give a method. Notice I didn't use any parentheses because this isn't a method, this is a variable. Remember how we tell the difference between methods and variables? We don't put any parentheses on them. And so right here, I'll say math.py, okay, and then I'm going to raise this to the 3rd power, let's say. I have no idea what pi to the 3rd power is. Let's see what it turns out to be. All right, I got 31.006. I'm going to take the word on that. So you could check that on a calculator and reference it that way.